The Art of Leadership Network.
Hey leaders, welcome to the LeadCulture Podcast. We're a part of the Art of Leadership Network. I'm your host, Jenni, founder and CEO of the Foresight Group. We're a company dedicated to helping leaders develop thriving teams. Each week, I'll be your guide as we explore practical strategies to equip you with the tools you need to lead with clarity, confidence, and build unstoppable momentum in your organization. My mission is to be your trusted coach, empowering you to master the art of self-leadership so you'll learn to lead yourself well so you can lead others better. Each week, we take a deep dive on a leadership or a culture topic. You'll hear stories from amazing guests and leaders like you who are committed to leading well. So let's dive in and keep learning on this leadership journey together. Friends, culture doesn't protect itself. If you don't design it, you'll default to one. And it's usually not the one that you want. Today, we're talking about the build phase of our LeadCulture Framework, where we create rhythms that protect and sustain your culture over time. If you've ever felt like your team is kind of drifting, you're constantly rehashing the same issues, or maybe feeling a little bit of burnout, it's often because there's no clarity or consistency. Without intentional rhythms, culture begins to unravel. That shows up as misalignment, inefficiency, and ultimately disengagement. That's why the build phase of the framework is so critical. This is where you take your culture from aspirational to operational. You're embedding it into the systems, the practices, and rhythms of how you lead every day. My guest today knows this firsthand. Carson Pedraza serves as Executive Director of Operations at Local Church in South Florida, where she's been instrumental in creating the playbook that protects and reinforces their culture. She's going to share practical ways they've built systems across their employee journey, from interviewing and onboarding to staff meetings and even handling departures, so that culture isn't left to chance, but really becomes a lived experience. So Carson, it's so fun to have you back. You're a repeat guest on the podcast, which is so fun.
Fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh. I was telling you before we started recording that anytime we get to connect is always like a joy.
Absolutely.
And so I'm thrilled to have you here today talking specifically about this part of the framework and just diving into the nuts and bolts of building the culture plan, kind of the unsexy part of culture, right? It's like now we need the rhythm. Now we need the system. So I'd love for listeners to hear a bit of your story. Maybe they haven't gone into the archives to hear past episodes, but tell us about your role at local church and when you realized culture had to become a bigger focus for you as a leader.
Yeah. So I'm the Executive Director of Operations. And so I handle kind of the business side of the church, right? The HR and the finances and facilities, all that kind of stuff, but also our team development and our culture. And so kind of leading our team is a big part of my role, and keeping us focused on what God has called us to do is a big part of my role. But my journey with the idea of culture and leadership started way before that. My entire ministry career, I've had the privilege of being a part of some really incredible churches that grew in the seasons that I was there. But what happens a lot of times when churches are growing is also their cultures change. And so I got to witness what happens as a culture shifts within an organization, and kind of take notes as a bystander, or even in roles with less authority or less leadership, and see what happens, see the impact of culture on the team, on the leadership team within those organizations, as well as the fruit of what's coming out of that church. And so I can think back to even as an 18-year-old in ministry, watching a shift of culture happen in some churches, and then realizing, oh, this is a big deal. And it has such impact that goes so much further than we would even imagine.
That's huge. I love that you just had that intuition or instinct. I think everybody feels it, but they don't know how to name it. Like, because we all can look back at stories or seasons of our journey and go, I loved that place. I didn't like that place. But I love that you had experienced it and saw some of the shifts and transitions, because culture is going to shift and transition, especially when an organization is growing or, there are key things that kind of impact the culture. And I love that you had your eyeballs on that even before you were in the seat where you were responsible for leading it. Did that, like having that history and experience, did it make you show up to this role differently? Like, do you feel like you just had a different lens on when you assumed this role?
Yeah. I mean, my background is not in business at all. And a lot of people in my seat have a business background, which I felt when I started was at a disadvantage for me. But the reality is I've kind of worked in several areas in ministry, right? I did student ministry and I did creative ministry. And in those areas, you see the impact of what happens for the whole. And so because I was able to kind of see the impact of the organization from several different seats, it was really able to prepare me for the seat that I'm in now.
That's so good. Yeah, I love that. I do think sometimes the best culture champions are the people who have observed it from different points of view, right?
Yeah.
To go, I've seen and experienced what it feels like in this seat or in this seat. And, and so then that's helping inform your, how you show up in your perspective. Leaders often think of culture as something kind of intangible, right? It's the fluffy stuff or the fuzzy stuff that kind of just happens. I think a lot of times people just think it's just, and it is kind of what happens. The point is, do we want to be purposeful about it? But you discovered that it needed a system to actually survive. So share how you came to see culture as a system and that really needed to be intentionally designed. Like you kind of make that connection of like, it is how I feel, but we need a system to really reinforce what we aspire to.
Yeah. So we sat down, we're the fruit of a merged church, right? So we were an older church that merged with a church plant in 2016. And so we changed our name and changed our branding and did all of the really fun stuff that happens in a church plant. And we sat down and we defined our culture, right? We wrote out our vision and our values and our DNA, which is our internal staff values, for lack of a better term. And we wrote it all down. And we were so proud of the amount of work and the product. And it was catchy and it was sticky. And we were so excited about it. And we operated with this culture for a year. That was this defined culture for a year. And came back a year later to have a meeting to say, how's it going? And realize just because we say it doesn't mean it's true or doesn't mean that it's functioning the way that we've idealized it to be. And so we plastered it on the walls, but we didn't have any system to reinforce it and to have our team engage with the culture the way that we defined it.
Gosh, that's so good. Because I think we're so guilty of that, right? And especially that's really good and meaningful work. So not to negate it, because especially when you're merging two cultures like that, coming up with common language and aspiration of this is who we are and this is how we want to work together is really, really key. We talk about that even in the define phase of the framework. But it's if we stop there, everybody still operates. The operational behavior is still whatever we knew before then, right? We still default to whatever was familiar. And so I think your story is a unique one because there's other leaders that will be in a similar stage similar circumstance where it is two cultures coming together. I went through that back in my corporate days. We went through a corporate merger and it was oh my gosh, as much as these two entities do the same thing, the how we did those things was completely different. And so it took so much work to get alignment around that. So I love that you guys were purposeful to define it, but you recognized unless we're building the systems that help reinforce it, it's going to, we just keep doing the same things and not actually living into the culture we defined.
Yeah.
So Carson, let's get practical a little bit. The build phase is where we put rhythms in place to protect the culture at every stage of the employee journey. And I really employee journey is something that HR professionals are familiar with, and that, employees have a start date with us and they have an end date with us. And in between are all the things that we do on a daily basis to engage them. So, and that one of the things that I found, and I'll be curious how this played out for you, but I found that I needed to be intentional that at every stage of the employee journey, we were actually reinforcing what we had defined, right? So talk us through maybe just overview of what that looked like. And then we maybe get into a couple of specific spots to hear what you did specifically.
Yeah. So, instead of us looking at our system and saying, where does culture fit into this system? We kind of just said, based on what our culture is, what does the system need to be? Because I think sometimes we try to fit our culture into our old process. And it's like, well, the reason why you started that process is not the reason the reason's not the same anymore. So sometimes we like to hold on to these old habits and just paint it a new color and say, but that's our culture now because it's our branded color. And so we just kind of threw out that old system. And if we wanted to pull from it, we would, but we just kind of started from scratch and said hey, who cares what we've done in the past? If this is who we are, what are we going to do next? And what's this process going to be like for our team?
Love that. Yeah. Yeah. That's such a good framing of it's funny because I'll sometimes be working with an organization and we'll have defined their culture and it might be, they have a value of fun and creativity. And then I get the employee handbook and it is the most miserable and boring tool I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, nothing about that is equal to, and I realized we have to have some legal things that need to be in employee handbooks, but it was the tone and the feel and the vibe of it can still match who you say you are. So, that's a very simple example, but I love that you were, hey, wait, let's let the culture drive the system or drive how we need to do these things. So tell us a little bit of what that looked like. Maybe how are you hiring or interviewing for culture? Maybe start at the beginning of an employee journey and hit some of those places for us.
Yeah. So our interview process, we have an interview that's just for culture. So after you've made it through the initial interview, your second interview is going to be we're not going to talk about skill set at all. We're going to talk about our culture pieces. So one of our culture pieces within our organization is that we learn for the best. Learning is a really important part of a leader's life. And so we'll ask the question, we won't say, hey, we value learning here. We're not going to lead. We're not going to feed them answers. We just say, hey, who are you learning from right now? Because if you're not already learning, the learning curve to be a part of our team, the jump is too high. And so we kind of ask those questions that have to do with our culture that's already ingrained, right? A big part of our culture is servanthood and, serving our community. And so we'll ask questions like, hey, how do you like to serve your community? Just to see, right? And you can tell if somebody's bluffing or you can tell. And so those kind of questions are a big deal. Another thing we'll do is if you make it pretty far down the interview line, we'll do a peer interview where we'll send you to lunch with 3 or 4 people on our team who aren't your hiring manager, oftentimes are not even going to be on your team. And by that point, people think they've got the gig. They're not with a person who's me, their boss. They maybe let their guard down a little bit. And our team who knows our culture, who knows what we're looking for, they're able to kind of poke and prod a little bit in a less invasive way and come back and say hey, this person is super sweet, but it's not a fit. And we trust our team to know that, they kind of will tell us why, here's what they shared. Here's what their lifestyle looks like. Here's the way that they engage with the team. And that's been really helpful for us.
That's huge. I love you called out something that is really critical and that you didn't say, hey, here's our values. Do you like them? Do you align with them?
Right.
It's you asked questions that would give you a sense of, do they hold that value?
Yeah.
Do they already operate that way? And of course, you want somebody who's pretty well, I'd say at least 80% aligned with the values, right?
Sure.
There's not a glaring, and I don't know what that looks like for you guys, but sometimes people will say to me, well, if they're not 100% aligned, well, do they have the potential to be? Are they at least demonstrating that they have that they have an affinity towards that. They're already demonstrating that. So I just call that out to go, you're intentional in how you're asking those questions. And then I love that peer, casual peer interview, because it's the simple things of like, were they respectful to the restaurant staff, right? Or
absolutely.
Like just daily behavior stuff, you'll start seeing, do they hold the same values that we hold? So I love that. Somebody passes all those interviews. They're, looks like they're a great fit. What does onboarding look like? How do you catch them up to your culture? Because then that's always that, like, how do you fill in the stories and how do you catch them up to speed? So what does that look like for you guys?
It shows up a couple ways. A lot of the way that I like to lead in our culture is to lead by example. Like I set the tone and I set the pace, or our team does, like for our team. And so a really small thing, like one of our culture pieces is we obsess about the details. Details are a big deal to us. We want things to be personal for people. So before your first day, you'll get like a survey about your favorite things. And so your welcome basket won't just be a random snack. It'll be your favorite snack, right?
Like, I love that. Yeah.
And one of our things is we're the local church. We want to support local. So we're going to find a local vendor that carries this thing that you like. We set that tone, and you'll get like our top 4 books that everybody on our team is going to read, right? We set the tone even with that basket, and it's branded and it looks good, all those sorts of things. But
That's
we
cool.
also, our onboarding process, like we have culture meetings where we walk through our culture guide. And we explain our culture and the why. We've got this little book that we'll walk through, and we go over our org chart and we go over our communication guidelines. Like you're not just being thrown into it and said like, figure it out, catch up. Like here's a field guide. Like if you want to know what our culture is, like here's the field guide on how to get started. And then even part of our onboarding process is you'll meet with all of our directors, and you'll get to learn pretty quickly, like, not just what their ministry does, but their heart for ministry. And that really catches on really quickly for our team.
Yeah, that's so good. And I love they're experiencing it is just with like that basket. Like, you said we're local church, we're sourcing local, vendors for the things that are in there. We're paying attention to what you like and what matters to you. It's like they're experiencing it probably. Right. I mean, by that point, they've probably read your values and they know your heart of your ministry. But now you're just kind of immersing them in it. They're experiencing it, which is so powerful. I love that. Talk about like everyday rhythm, staff meetings, one-on-ones. Like, how does it show up in those places for you guys?
Yeah. So our leadership team collabs, which is our staff meetings. We have a monthly rhythm of those, right? And so the first of the month is our celebration. And one of our kind of team values is we celebrate every win. And so we celebrate what God's doing in our ministry that day. We celebrate our team's birthdays and for the month and their work anniversaries for the month. The second one is leadership, and we're always learning. And so we will talk through a book that we're reading together as a team, or we'll do a podcast together as a team. We'll talk about the application of that. The third week is our culture and calendar, where I will teach a piece of our culture
Love it.
From a practical standpoint of like, and we've been doing this for 5 years now, right? Like they have heard what this is, but we've got to keep it in front of them, right? And so we'll teach that. And then the fourth week is worship and prayer, where our pastor will share his heart and his vision, whatever God is teaching him, and we'll worship together as a team. The fifth one, if there's a fifth Tuesday, is a play day. It's basically an adult field trip. We just go and hang out together.
Brilliant.
But the idea is like we have this built-in rhythm, but even in the breakdown of what that meeting looks like is based off of our team values, right? So we start and end with Jesus. We're going to start in prayer and we're going to close in prayer. We're going to pray for each other. Pray for the needs of our team, because we fight for each other is one of our team values. We celebrate every win. And so we start every single Tuesday morning celebrating what God is doing in our ministry areas. But even the prompt for that celebration time is, our vision is to connect people to Jesus and one another. What connection wins can we celebrate that are happening in your ministry area that maybe nobody else knows, or that we can give God kind of recognition for what he's doing in your ministry areas? And then we obsess about the details. So we look at the details of the metrics of like, how are we doing? Are we in the green? Are we growing? But it's not just attendance numbers, it's first time guest numbers, because that's a big deal to us. It's salvation numbers. That's a big deal to us. Like, we're looking at the things that can actually inform us to make better leadership decisions. And so even the way that that's structured, so much of it is through the funnel of our culture and our defined, what we call our DNA, but it's our staff values.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. And just the intentionality around that, the values or DNA are even informing those rhythms, right? And then, so tell me this, because I'll hear this from leaders, because leaders get bored and get, routine gets monotonous. You said you've been doing this for 5 years. And I mean, so how do you keep it fresh for yourself and fresh for the team? Because I'm like, the first thing I'm going to say is I'm like, that consistency is so critical to reinforcing culture. And like, I love that you've got a rhythm of what each week looks like and what you do, and the consistency of that. But it's easy to get bored and for it to start feeling mundane. So how are you keeping that fresh for yourself and then for the team?
Yeah, I think that maybe the methodology that we do it, we kind of will shift, right? So when we're learning, like the leadership books that we're reading, we will try to kind of shift what the theme is. And we're kind of looking at our team and saying, what does our team need right now? Like, we're trying to make it as applicable as possible. Like, we're not just going to say, hey, this is a core leadership book that everybody should read. We're evaluating our team every single year. We're evaluating our organization every single year, and then saying, if these are our weaknesses, we need to read up on these things, right? And so some of it is just about keeping it as current and up to date as possible. But I mean, that's even the same thing as like pastors teach the same thing every single year. They just package it in a way that feels fresh and new for the church. Even the way that our like leadership collabs and our meetings are held, it's the same thing. We're just packaging it in a fresh way. And so every once in a while, we'll, instead of me facilitating it, we'll have somebody else kind of facilitate it or kind of do a takeover. But really, it's just keeping it as fresh and applicable as possible. And some of that just has happened. We've made a shift recently where it's been a little bit less, because I facilitate those collabs a little bit. We've made it a little bit more inviting for the team to be a part of it, in that, like, instead of me just teaching on culture, here's the piece, here's what you need to know, here's the why, here's the application. I've made it more conversational of like, if this is the concept, right? If this is the framework that we're working in, what, and then we'll kind of either do an activity, or I'll throw up like a 4-square grid of like, how do we place ourselves to make it more where they're participating in a way that puts them in it instead of just receiving it.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. Which takes energy on your part. I mean, let's also acknowledge that, as let's say culture champion in your organization, you're having to say, how do I keep this fresh? How do I get them to engage it at a different level or look at it from a different angle? And so I love that of like, and then the participatory part of it is so valuable. So that's super good. How do you hold the team accountable to the culture?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. Our culture is in our reviews. Like, it's in there. Our values are in there. Our DNA is in there, and you're rating yourself, and you're being rated. I'm like, are you living it out? And that's a really clear way that we do it. We really, when we are having accountability conversations for our team, the conversation is not, hey, I didn't like the way that you did that. The conversation is, hey, we obsess about the details around here. Let's talk about the ways that we missed some details in this opportunity or in this situation. And so we're leading the conversations with culture. It's not my preference. It's not, this is the way that I think we should be leading. It's, we have defined what leading looks like around here. We've agreed upon it. And I think that's a big deal, Jenni, is sometimes we will we will say, this is what the culture is. But we have to have an agreed upon definition of what it actually means. Because, for instance, one of our culture pieces is that we plan in pencil. And the idea is we're going to be diligent in planning. We believe the Holy Spirit shows up in planning as much as he shows up in the moment, right? But we're also going to be flexible if God wants to do something that will bear more fruit. We're going to be flexible to his adjustment. So it's not we plan in pencil because I didn't prepare, you have to be flexible. It's not, hey, we changed our mind, you have to be flexible. It's, hey, we prepared, God spoke and we moved. We're going to be flexible in that setting. And so there has to be an agreed upon mutual understanding of what is the culture. And we all have to understand it so that we can live it out. But then you're able to say, hey, we obsess about the details. Where do you feel like where can we get better about dealing with this? We speak the good in everyone. When I saw the way that you were speaking to this person or about this person, help me understand how that was speaking the good, right? And so it's all anchored in our DNA.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those examples, Carson, because you're right. It is let the agreed upon culture, that DNA, actually guide the conversation rather than personal preference. Or it's like, no, we've agreed on this together. And I love how you called that out. In the define phase, we talk about, you build those values, the belief behind it. Why does this matter to us so much, right? What does it look like? So we know because everybody brings their own interpretation to what the value might mean. So I love that you called that out, because a lot of times we'll shortchange that because we assume it's obvious, right? We assume, everybody knows what we mean by believe the best, or, whatever else, value you might have defined. When in fact, they might be bringing a perspective from another culture and a different experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they think they're operating in alignment with our culture, but because we haven't given enough definition for this is what this means here. So I love that you called that out, because then again, in those accountability conversations, it's, hey, we've agreed on this. This is who we are and how we work together. Tell me, let's unpack this situation together. How could we have done that differently? Or, and also the reinforcing of it. Hey, this is who we are and how we work together. And gosh, look at how we showed up. So the accountability is sometimes both holding us accountable when we're out of alignment, and then reinforcing when we are in alignment, of like calling out where we are living into the best of who we want to be.
Yeah, when we do our celebrations as a team, as often as possible, when somebody celebrates something, if I can tag it to a DNA piece, that's my response every time. Of like, if someone shares, hey, I had a serve team member show up and they did this thing, my immediate response is, I'm so proud of you for bringing people along in that circumstance, because one of our DNA pieces is we bring people along, right? So when you can reinforce it and help, because sometimes people forget, like they're just doing what they're supposed to do, but they haven't assigned it to the DNA piece. Like helping people identify, oh yeah, that is me living out this culture. That is me doing this thing that I'm supposed to be doing, is a big deal.
That's so good, Carson. Like, you're right. Because we think it's obvious, but that's our opportunity as the leader. To connect those dots, help them see the through line of, hey, you just did it. You lived into who we are. And so I love that you identified that, because it's such a big deal. Such a big deal. Talk about training and development. This is a place where I am hearing more and more team members hungry to be trained, to be developed. And what are you guys doing? How does that fit into your rhythms as a team? And how do you see it even reinforcing culture?
Yeah. So we have what we call our team advance. Every single person on our team each month is reading a book. They are listening to or watching 2 podcasts a month. And we're all on a Bible reading plan together every single day.
Love it. Yeah.
And this has just reinforced the idea of like, we're going to get better. If you want to get better as a leader at our church, like there's no excuse for you not to on our team. Because if there's ever an opportunity for someone to learn or to grow or to be developed, like we're going to provide that, because we want that for everybody in our team. As we get better as leaders, that makes our organization better. And that's ultimately for the kingdom, right? And so there's a big part in that where we just, we probably overemphasize that. And then, I shared each month we're training on culture. Like each month we're doing leaderships. We're talking through the books that we're reading. And we're talking about application. Like how does this apply in our context? So many times we'll read a book. Even this last month, I had to say, hey, let's remove the language CEO and put ministry leader
Perfect.
because like connecting those dots for people, right?
Yeah.
And then each month I'm teaching a piece of culture and I'm grounding it in like, what's the biblical basis behind this? Like, what does Jesus have to say about this concept? And so we're doing that. And then once a year, we do a 2-day offsite team building and team development. And so much of that is informed by like our executive team is doing our annual evaluation. It's like, what does our team need? Where do we need, what are we coming up against in the future that we need to prepare our team for? Right. So we're looking around the corners and saying, hey, our team's going to need to learn how to double their team in the next year. How do we equip them with the things that they need to do? So it's not just, well, let's make our team better. It's like, no, what's coming?
What do they need?
That they need right now to like, we'll define our goals. We'll say, okay, if these are our goals for next year, what groundwork do we need to do for our team so that they can start hitting those goals in January? Like we don't have to wait till December. And so we're spending a lot of time and energy investing in developing our team, and doing so with a lot of intention, and being really goal oriented in doing so, because we don't want it to just be fluff. We want it to be valuable for the team.
Yeah. Gosh. Okay. So the couple things you said there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to point this out because I think what I see a lot of leaders do is they know they need to do development and training and equipping of their team. And it just feels overwhelming. Like they just kind of get paralyzed because they're like, well, we don't have a full-time person who can do that. We don't have a budget for that, or whatever the reasonable excuses. Like I'm not like, I get that. What I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's you guys are looking at, you're already doing your strategic planning as a leadership team. Like you've got your goals, and most of us do. We do that pretty well. And then you're saying, okay, what does the team need? So maybe we identify 3 core things they need this coming year. And that, we'll just say that for simplicity. But you already have a rhythm. You already have rhythms and already built in. It's in your monthly meeting rhythms where you're teaching and training. You're already doing book studies together. So it's not, you're just adding that into your rhythm. Am I hearing you right on that?
Yeah. So we've got the rhythm defined. What we're doing is we're inserting the what into the rhythm. So when we know we're going to read 12 books next year, when we look at, hey, this is what our team needs, well, then what are those 12 books, right? Like what do they need based on what we already know our team needs?
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I just point that out because it doesn't have to be overly complicated and great upheaval. It's like, if you can build a little bit of a rhythm, and I'm sure for you guys even, it's probably developed over time. Over years, you've refined and you've found the exact rhythm that really works best for your team. But I often will tell leaders, just simple and consistent. What can you start doing? Start reading a book with your team. And maybe a book a month feels too aggressive because they're not in the rhythm. We'll do a book a quarter, or do a podcast a month, or, something that is like, hey, what can I simply do but consistently do that starts to build a rhythm that creates this avenue for training and development? You'll get more sophisticated the longer you do it. Is that
absolutely
true for you guys?
Yeah. When we started our 2-day team development thing, we just had budget cuts and we couldn't go to a conference. That was just our reality. And the first year that we did it, we bought the digital package of the Global Leadership Summit. And I spent 3 days going through every single one and just finding the one that made the most sense for our team. And we did it in our auditorium. We used the screen that we had. It was so simple. We just needed to fill the gap of conference. And then we integrated better strategic planning rhythms and then said, we've already got this thing. How do we make this thing more intentional? And how do we utilize this thing to help us accomplish our goals?
Yeah, that's so good. It makes me think of, and I love that. It was like, okay, you had the constraint of budget was tight. We can't do the full conference, but what can we do? And I think that's an important question for leaders to say, just because I can't do it the way I might have done it or hoped to have done it, how can I recreate this just in a different way? Sure. And because we're going to bump into that. We're going to have the years where the budget's tighter and leaner, but it's like, don't abandon it. Find a different way out. You'll laugh at this, but Carson, this was back, when I was on church staff years ago. we had budget constraints one year, but a staff 2-day retreat was a really big commitment for us. Like we were like,
Yeah.
this is always so good. It's so, such a key part of the health of our team. And it was a super tight budget year. And we rented cabins at a local, national or state park. It was a state park. So we rented cabins at a state park and we said we were going to camp. And we literally camped in cabins where everybody brought their sleeping bags and
Oh my goodness.
everybody had KP duty. It was like your team was on, dinner duty and yours was on cleanup duty. I mean, it probably wasn't everybody's favorite, but the memories we made were so phenomenal. I'm not sure that I would repeat that. And I'm not suggesting everybody go out and do that with their teams. But it worked for us. Like the season we were in, the dynamics of our team, we had a very young team at the time, so they were a little more amenable to sleeping in cabins. But anyway, it was like, we've got to find a way. And it was the scrappiest way to do it. But it's still some of my favorite memories, because we said we don't want to sacrifice this because it's so core to who we are. And your example was probably a much more realistic example for most organizations. But finding a way to say, don't abandon the heart of what you need to do to protect your culture. Just think differently about it, how you can do it differently. I know I'm running close on time, but talk about, as you're building out the systems for culture, resistance, apathy, all of those things, it's just kind of normal. People doubt it or are like questioning it or whatever the case may be. What were some of the challenges that you found over the years? And was there like a breakthrough moment or a moment where you were like, you know what, this is working? Like all these rhythms and systems I'm trying to create, it actually is helping create the culture we aspire to.
Yeah. I mean, I think resistance is natural. I think in our setting, apathy is probably more of a struggle for us or more natural within our team. Because we grew really quick, you have people who've been around, like people who were there before me, right? Like, and there's some of that. Like I was here before you. I was the one in the church plant that was unloading, right? So there's like that part of it. I can think specifically when we added like performance reviews that were a little more intentional, a little more maybe intense, that there was some just like, this just feels so corporate, right? And then even this last year, we changed the scale on the culture piece of our performance review because we had like a sliding scale, like a 1 to 10. Well, it's really easy to kind of hide in the middle there. It's really easy to give yourself so much grace, to give your team grace. But the reality is either you're living out our culture or you're not living out our culture. And so we shifted it this year to like, this is a priority and this is a struggle. To make it like, let's call it what it is. And I was talking to my husband about this earlier today, about this is one of these things that I saw a lot of resistance in. And he was like, well, I actually think that people were fine with it. And I realized like, well, the people who weren't fine with it were the people who are struggling with our culture, right? They're not living out our culture. So I don't say that every time there's resistance, it's people who aren't on board with their culture. But it does say a lot. It does speak, like people's reactions and responses to things speaks very clearly to me about how like they kind of tell on themselves a little bit in those circumstances. And so I kind of am, I kind of just kind of keep my mouth shut and watch it and take notes for the future but there's also like, that's also a coaching opportunity as a leader to say, hey, I get that this is new for you. Let's talk about why we're doing this. Let's talk about the impact that this is going to have.
And leaving room for, I mean, it feels crazy that they would have missed the why in your DNA elements because of how much you do to reinforce it. But there, sometimes what I've found is like, sometimes an apathy, a disengagement, maybe they're not living into it sometimes might be a clarity piece, like somewhere they misinterpreted something, they misunderstood something. So, like starting with that of like a coaching moment. Is there a
Yeah.
place where I can shore this up? Like, and I like that. I mean, it's no wonder you got a little resistance on that, because you're right. 1 to 10
Yeah.
scale, it's easy to just kind of like, land in the murky middle by being just really clear about are you or aren't you? And then that sparks really important conversations.
Yeah.
And so I love that you moved that way. I think, and then making sure your leaders are equipped to have just good, healthy coaching conversations around it to say, hey, is there anything that we, maybe it's just as a gap in understanding, or maybe they're not fully understanding the why, maybe they're interpreting this differently, that might be leading to them not being fully embracing of that part of our DNA. Or is it that's not who they are? And now that's really clear. And now we both know we need to have additional conversations to figure out if this is the right fit moving forward. So good. Okay. Good grief, Carson. I could talk to you for hours because I love this stuff and I love how you're leading through it. There's probably a lot of leaders who are listening who are nodding their heads and thinking, yes, we need this, but it feels overwhelming. I hear everything Carson's built over the last 5 years and I love that, but where do I start? What's one small but powerful step people could take even this week to start building those systems to support their culture? How would you coach us?
I think that, I misread this question. And so I have to rethink what I was thinking about for your answer for this one.
No, that's good. That's good.
For the one step for like the building phase.
Yeah. Or just even, it doesn't have to even be specific to that. It could be a little bit of like, they're hearing it. They know they need to be more intentional about their culture.
Yeah.
How would you encourage them to start being more intentional with culture?
Yeah. Because we're at the point, they've already defined their culture, right? We've already talked about that last.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. That's such a good question. I think if you've already defined your culture, I think it's worth just taking one thing at a time. Like, Jenni, you mentioned the handbook. We threw our handbook away and started from scratch. Just take one thing. And maybe I'm a big fan of let's start high impact. Take one thing that's already a rhythm that you already have in place, and then just put it to the side and say, okay, if I know what my culture is, what does this rhythm look like that reflects our culture?
That's great.
And just start with one.
That's a great question.
And I kind of have a couple things that I'm still looking at and saying, okay, we've done it this way for X amount of time. I have 3 things this year that I want us to kind of refocus for culture. You will find once you start pulling that thread, like there are a lot of sacred cows that need to be readjusted or reanalyzed. But just start with one. Start with your staff meeting that already exists and say, how do we make our staff meeting feel like our culture?
There you go. That's so good, right? Yeah. I think the potential is to get overwhelmed. And it's always the danger I have when I'm sharing the framework with people and like talking about everything we do, because it's like, it is a lot, but it's so achievable if you just start with a piece and you'll still feel some momentum. And, and then you add another, and then you just gradually over time, you keep working on it and you begin to see it. Okay. This is my last question for you. What excites you the most about the culture you're building with your team?
Man, this, I feel like my answer is going to be like a Jesus answer, but I don't mean it to be a Jesus answer. Here's what I really believe. I believe that, when we are building a healthy culture, it's not just to have a thriving organization. It's to have a thriving organization that reaches people for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And when God's hand shows up, when you've put in the work, when you've been faithful, when you've done the heavy lifting, and then he puts his hand on it, the fruit that comes out of that is not just a healthy team, right? Like, I want a team when people have said yes to their calling and have oftentimes made sacrifices to show up in their calling vocationally. I've seen what it can do to your soul. I am excited that I believe that the souls of our team, that they are going to be okay and have sustainable ministry careers. Like, that's so exciting. more exciting is that it shows up in our team and then their serve teams and then their connect groups and then the life of our church and then in our community and like the impact. I mean, I shared with you before, like we're about to break ground on a new building and we're known in our community as a church for those who need healing and who need help. And we were one of the fastest growing churches in the country. And like, that's not because of us. It's because we did work and God put his hand on it. And I'm like, okay, what excites me about our culture is like, this culture is not just for us. It's not just for us to say it's a fun place to work. It's to say we're building this thing because the mission is people need the hope of Jesus. And we want to be the best at it. We just want to do it well and healthy and have fun while we're doing it. And the fruit shows up in really, really cool ways.
So good, Carson. I love that so much. Leaders, I hope you caught this, that culture doesn't just sustain itself. It requires intentional rhythms. This is the essence of the build phase, where culture moves from aspirational to operational. And I just love Carson, I love so much your perspective on that, because it is ultimately in service of the mission. Like, we're not doing culture just to, create warm fuzzies and make everybody happy and personally fulfilled. We want people living out their calling, finding fulfillment in that with doing great work with great people for a mission that ultimately matters, because it's bigger than us. And that's where it fits in the equation. It's like, this is a piece of that big picture that God is calling us all to. And it's so, so, so powerful. So friends, I'd love to invite you to join other culture champions like Carson in our brand new LeadCulture Network. We are trying to create a network and a community where culture champions who believe in this work want to keep learning and growing together. So inside the network, you'll gain access to the full LeadCulture Framework resources, practical tools, live training, and a community of leaders who are committed to building thriving and unstoppable teams. It's everything you need to champion culture in your organization. So if you're wondering where to start, the network is the right place. We're opening the doors in Q4, and you can get on the wait list right now. So just check the link in the show notes and join us when the network launches, because the conversations I'm having with leaders like Carson are the kind of conversations I want to have regularly with all of you as you're seeking to build the cultures that help you achieve the mission God has called you to. So, Carson, thank you so much for joining me today. So appreciate the work that you're doing. And leaders, thanks for being with us. Share this with a friend, share it with your team, and keep leading well.